COVID-19 had a significant impact on the economy, but it is currently on the mend. During the pandemic, almost 40 million Americans lost their jobs, but billionaires saw their net worth soar by $500 billion. What caused this to happen? How did the world's wealthiest people increase their fortunes? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Welcome back to The Grand Luxury. If you haven't already, make sure you subscribe and ring that bell to get notified every time we upload a new video. Watch till the end to find out more about the 1% just continuing to get wealthier. When millions of people in the United States and throughout the world went into lockdown in March 2020, it was unavoidable that the economy would suffer. As vital as the efforts were to get the coronavirus pandemic under control from a medical standpoint, there was a downside. Large sections of the economy came to a grinding halt. The ramifications of this epidemic have also been felt globally because it is a global pandemic. If you're wondering how much COVID-19 has affected the economy, well, keep on watching. The economic depression in the early months of the pandemic, according to the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, was comparable to the Great Depression's initial drops. And that is how it affected the world. Fortunately, the U.S. economy began to recover later in 2020 when massive stimulus measures were implemented. The rapid arrival of vaccinations, as well as the U.S. government's attempts to encourage everyone to obtain these injections and immunize themselves, gave the economy a much-needed boost. Nevertheless, the pandemic and its economic impact are far from over, especially as new, highly contagious virus variants continue to emerge. Let's now discuss how the pandemic has impacted the world's interconnected economies. Certain industries, notably tourism and hospitality, were hit particularly hard by the pandemic. Unnecessary travels were ceased, resulting in significant financial losses for airlines and cruise ship companies, as well as smaller businesses that rely on tourism money. Shops and restaurants either closed their doors entirely or opened with limited seating space and poor demand for in-store dining. The secondary consequences of the pandemic were also felt by those working in seemingly unrelated fields. As shopping slowed and demand for non-essential goods such as new clothes diminished, manufacturers, particularly those outside the medical profession, experienced fewer orders. Due to government-mandated forbearance laws, banks absorbed the loss of mortgage payments. Oil firms watched prices plunge, even going negative for the first time in history in April 2020, as investors perceived reduced demand due to the lack of even daily commutes. Every pandemic is different, which makes estimating the consequences of such a disaster particularly difficult. Furthermore, there aren't many cases that compare to the worst-case COVID-19 impacts estimates. The 2009 H1N1 flu, for example, was prevalent, but not as devastating. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, there were 61 million H1N1 illnesses in the United States, with just 13,000 deaths. The most recent pandemic that comes close to the COVID-19 pandemic was the so-called Spanish flu, which plagued the world from 1918 to 1919. According to the CDC, around 500 million people were infected with the disease, which claimed the lives of nearly 50 million people globally. There is a scarcity of economic data from the early 20th century. However, according to a study by the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis, many businesses, notably those in the service and entertainment industries, suffered double-digit revenue losses. The economic disruption was brief, as the underlying health crisis passed in 1919. What does the current pandemic look like in comparison? Even though COVID-19 has a lower mortality rate than the Spanish flu, its economic impact has already been felt. Because the underlying virus is so contagious, 1/4 to 1/2 of the world's population will likely contract it absent drastic control measures or a vaccine, according to a group of researchers from the University of Hong Kong and Harvard University. Governments all over the world took drastic measures to stop it from spreading. However, those measures, which included keeping the majority of shoppers and restaurant guests at home, came at a significant financial cost. Before revealing the second half of this video, please make sure to hit the thumbs up button and share Grand Luxury with your friends. We have truly seen the greatest of times and the worst of times since the pandemic began. The best for the world's 10 wealthiest men and the worst for 99% of the world's population. In the early days of the COVID-19 epidemic, which had massive influence on the global economy as well as the US economy, many workers and potential buyers withdrew. For example, retail sales in the United States fell in April 2020 before rebounding in July 2020. Furthermore, data from the Federal Reserve revealed the biggest drop in manufacturing output since the 1940s, but it has subsequently recovered. In contrast, according to an Oxfam report, the richest people, who are only 1% of the world's population, increased their wealth exponentially between March 2020 and November 2021, while the rest of the world lost money, among other things. The founders of Tesla, Amazon, Microsoft, Oracle, Alphabet, and Meta are among the top 10 wealthiest people on the planet, with 8 of the top 10 richest people on the planet working in the tech industry. While Warren Buffett is not actively involved in technology, he does have significant tech interests in his portfolio. Since the pandemic began, the wealth of Ireland's 9 billionaires has soared by more than half, from 18.3 billion euros to 49.7 billion euros. According to the Irish Times, Indian-born Irish citizen and building mogul Palonji Mistry is at the top of the list, followed by Patrick and John Collison of Stripe. According to the Oxfam report, a 99% windfall tax on the world's richest people could pay for vaccines for everyone, closing funding gaps in climate measures, universal health care, and social protection, and address gender-based violence in more than 80 countries, while still leaving them $8 billion richer than before COVID-19. Here's a look at the tech millionaires, according to Oxfam, who saw their fortunes skyrocket during the pandemic. The first is, of course, Elon Musk. With a net worth of about $270 billion, Elon Musk, the CEO of Tesla and SpaceX, is the richest person on the planet. Elon Musk, who practically lives in the news cycle, has profited handsomely in the last 2 years thanks to Tesla's record-breaking success as the world's most valuable electric car producer, in which he controls 23% of the stock. Between January 2020 and November 2021, he made roughly $293 billion, according to Forbes. The second richest person on the list, Amazon founder Jeff Bezos, has more than tripled his fortune. It's no surprise that Jeff Bezos' fortune grew throughout the outbreak. Even though he stepped down as CEO of Amazon a year ago, Jeff Bezos remains the company's executive chairman. Amazon stock has risen since the pandemic began, adding more than $86 billion to Bezos' fortune. During the pandemic, his space travel business Blue Origin soared to new heights, intensifying its competition with Musk's SpaceX for NASA's future space missions. Following them are Bill Gates and Steve Ballmer. Bill Gates, Microsoft's founder, and Steve Ballmer, the company's former CEO, made billions off the pandemic as Microsoft's revenue soared to new highs, with profits skyrocketing to more than $20 billion in its most recent quarter, fueled by cloud-based services. According to Forbes, Ballmer has made over $50 billion from Microsoft since the pandemic began, while Gates has made roughly $30 billion via COVID-19 rescue efforts. There's also Larry Ellison. According to CNBC, the Oracle co-founder and former CEO saw his fortune nearly quadruple from $59 billion in March 2020 to $125.7 billion presently. The Silicon Valley Software Corporation, which just entered the healthcare market with the $28.3 billion purchase of Cerner, saw its latest quarterly earnings jump by 6% to $10.4 billion. In addition, the company beat Microsoft to a tech collaboration arrangement with TikTok, resulting in a lot of legal wrangling. Larry Page and Sergey Brin are also on the list of people whose fortune doubled during the pandemic. Larry Page and Sergey Brin, co-founders of Google and now controlling shareholders of parent company Alphabet, are the world's 6th and 7th richest people, respectively. Page's net worth increased by 125% from $50.9 billion in March 2020 to $122.8 billion presently. Brin's net worth increased by the same amount, from $41.9 billion to $118.3 billion. During the pandemic, Alphabet reaped the benefits of increased online activity around the world, with revenues beating analyst projections to reach $61.88 billion in the second quarter of last year. And, of course, there's Mark Zuckerberg. Zuckerberg began the pandemic as the CEO of Facebook and is now the CEO of Meta, in which he owns a 13% share. During the pandemic, he saw his fortune nearly quadruple, from $54.7 billion to about $118 billion. Facebook had a solid quarterly performance in October of last year, just before being rebranded as Meta, as it set its sights on the metaverse, with billions pledged in the pipeline for the virtual reality world. How about you? Has the pandemic had varied effects on different social classes? What impact did the pandemic have on your finances? Leave your comments below. We'd love to hear from you. Alright guys, we're wrapping up today's video and we hope you enjoyed today's topic. Thanks for visiting our channel. If you liked this video, make sure to hit that like button and check out more on the Grand Luxury channel. Until next time!